from your stand, like from Marlin, like are you working on something related to that?
Basically building good developer pipeline and a good infrastructure pipeline for bringing TEs on GPUs to the market.
What else would make sense to add here other than AI and these GPUs?
Something really interesting that we are looking into is also getting verifiable front ends on the market.
Are these developers building like fully on chain, or is this type that comes to you like more trying to do just like maybe part of the, part of what they're building on chain and the rest off chain?
It is partly on chain and partly off chain. The way I like to think of co-processors is sort of you must know roll-ups, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically roll-ups taken to that extreme where you just strip out the chain aspect of a roll-up, right? So all you're left with is some computation that's happening on chain in a verifiable manner.
We're in Dubai with Crypto Newsy and in collaboration with Global Blockchain Show taking place here in Dubai in December. Today I'm with Roshan from Marlin. So I guess it would be only right to start from the beginning. Tell me about your company.
Cool. So I've got a project called Marlin, and our vision is basically to build what's called a co-processor. So it's a component that's separate from the blockchains that you have today, L1s, L2s, L3s, all that. And you get to just attach it to any blockchain. And that gives you scalability and a lot more capabilities that are not currently present in the current blockchains, right? So you basically get to do compute on that. That's like a lot cheaper than like doing it on chain and paying gas fees. You also get a lot more additional capabilities. For example, you get to do like Web2 requests. You can query API endpoints, RPCs, oracles, and you can also sort of run servers, right? What all of this basically lets you do is bring a more Web2-like experience to Web3. The user experience of Web3 is not quite there, as we know. And it's still not very familiar to users of like traditional Web2 projects, right? So our North Star or like the vision is basically to bring that sort of experience to Web3.
What are some of the key problems you focused on when you started building this?
Right. So the number one was to enable people to use all the applications and all the code that they already have, right? Which is maybe written in a lot of like popular languages, Python, Rust, C, whatever. Key point being none of that is Solidity, right?
Yeah.
We have a huge body of code that's written in like a lot of other languages. And we basically enable people to run all of that on our platform without making any changes. So the goal is you have a Web2 app, you develop your app like it would be a Web2 app, and you get to sort of like lift and shift that onto Web3 and make that Web3 native without really having to go through all the like problems that Web3 has.
It is very common to say that we're removing the pain points for the Web2 users. Like this is great, but like because everyone says this, I feel like it's important now to really point out what are these pain points that you're solving for these users.
Yeah, for sure. So let's maybe approach this from two directions, right? One is from the perspective of like Web2 developers. So Web2 developers already have a set of like existing pipelines and processes that they use to develop their applications, right? So what we enable is sort of let people do the same thing, but in Web3. Instead of having to go out and like learn Solidity, adopt Web3 native pipelines, you basically get to retain all of the innovations that have happened in the Web2 space, all your traditional pipelines, and bring those over to Web3, right? The advantage of this is not just limited to developers though, because the fact that developers can now build Web2-like experiences in Web3 basically means that users also have an experience that's a lot more familiar, right?
Yeah.
You don't maybe want your users to actually know about what a wallet is, or like what an address is, or maybe even what a blockchain is, or like how your application even works, right? Yeah. Developers essentially get to like make interfaces that feel Web2 native and like feel a lot more familiar to users. So they can just start using it like they would use any like Web2 application.
That's good. Yeah. And how did you come up with this idea? I mean, I imagine, what were you doing before?
So my journey into Web3 is like from the technical side, mainly because I come from a technical background. The first time I heard about Bitcoin was I think around like 2011 or so. I just remember reading a lot of like blog posts, technical blog posts, and I came across a post which talked about Bitcoin and basically called it like internet money back then. Right? So that was my first introduction to Bitcoin, but I mean, I didn't really pay much heed to it. I mean, okay, fine, something called internet money exists. What do I care? Eh? Hindsight.
When was this?
This was like 2011. So
Okay.
hindsight, the next, fast forward like a few years, I was in college and some of my friends actually used to mine Bitcoin in college. And Ethereum also launched. And like from a programming background, I was like a little bit interested in like smart contracts and Solidity and how all that works. I still remember that I used to hate Solidity back then.
Yeah.
Because coming from like other programming languages, it felt a little primitive and a little bit like a toy language. Of course, now I know why it looks the way it does, but again, back then I didn't know a lot.
Yeah, I get it.
So again, that was more from the technical side. From the philosophical side, my boss at my first job was like really into crypto. So he pretty much got like the entire office into crypto, like talking about decentralization and like why we should care and all of that. And that was my first time being exposed to more of like the philosophical side of crypto and like Web3 space, right? And I think I was after a year or so after that, I decided, okay, hey, this space looks really interesting. There's a lot of like cool things happening over here. I like the philosophies behind it. So let's try and jump into it full time and let's maybe try to do something, And yeah, that's kind of how I'm here.
Yeah. And how did you get the idea for Marlin?
So Marlin basically started off as building like a network layer for blockchains, right?
Got it.
There were a lot of bottlenecks in networking, especially in the mining world where you need to get blocks and transactions faster in order to be competitive. And slowly that also extended into the MEV world where you need to, again, get blocks and transactions faster to be competitive as like an MEV searcher. So we started off with the networking side and we got requested around building stuff on the compute side as well. So we started getting into the computing side and sort of approaching this from more of like a cloud computing perspective. So the main problem for users today or like developers in the Web3 space today is that all of the tooling and all of that feels quite new, right? It's not what they're used to. It's not what they might have tried back in the days in college. It's not what a bootcamp might teach them. It's quite Web3 specific and like quite new for them to really like understand and get into all of that. We wanted to have some good tooling that feels like Web2 native to developers. And it's a lot easier to like transition from doing like traditional development to actually doing something in Web3, right? So yeah, that's kind of where we got the idea of like sort of building a platform that lets Web2 developers like onboard onto Web3.
Mm-hmm. How fast was the adoption? Like these Web2 developers like seeing an opportunity here to like quickly build something on chain. It does sound like very appealing. Mm-hmm. How quickly did you get this initial traction?
It took a long time, mainly because of the tooling that you need, right? So the core of our product is something called as a TE or like a trusted execution environment, right? And what that lets you do is it basically lets you delegate workloads onto somebody else while still getting the guarantees that they're actually doing what they're saying they're doing, right? So to give an example, today if I go and run a server on like AWS or something, I don't really have any guarantees on what AWS is actually doing with my server. Like they could tamper with my code, they could peek into my server and see what's going on and do all of that. It kind of works in Web2 because I guess I trust Amazon to not do anything, but it doesn't really carry over to Web3 because at the end of the day, it's just random people providing hardware and running servers, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of need the guarantee that trusted execution environments provide to actually make like a viable cloud platform in the Web3 space. And the problem over here is that TEs are kind of niche even in the Web2 world, which means that the tooling is like just terrible, to be honest. Yeah. So a lot of work has gone into making sure like the tooling is good enough and like it meets the standards of like Web2 developers. The problem with it being like a niche technology is that the developers who actually work on TEs are like quite specialists in that sense. So they don't really care about whether there's like really good tooling or stuff like that. But if you want your rank and file like Web2 developers to actually come and build something over here, then the tooling has to be good enough for them. So like years of work has just gone into making like the tooling good enough, and we believe we are at a good point right now.
What is next? What's exciting? What's coming up?
There's a lot of excitement around AI, I guess. And something that's really interesting that's happened over the last couple of years is that NVIDIA has come out with a GPU that has a TE inside it from the H100 series and so on. So a lot of work is actually going into like bringing that onto the market. So you can have like verifiable AI applications running alongside your blockchains, maybe agents, stuff like that. And all of them running using like Web2 native tooling and like in a verifiable manner. So you actually know that your AI bot is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, and it's not somebody else like manipulating the results or whatever.
That is really interesting. And from your stand, like from Marlin, like are you working on something related to that? Like are you doing what are you working on?
Related to that, what we're doing is basically building like a good developer pipeline and a good infrastructure pipeline for bringing Ts on GPUs to the market. So
I see.
Yeah, what that let you do is basically deploy a TE on a GPU, and you can sort of load an AI model or something into it, and you basically get to verify that, oh, hey, this guy says he's running maybe Llama 3.1 or something, and you basically get to verify that, yeah, he's actually running that. And yeah.
What else would make sense to add here other than AI and these GPUs?
Something really interesting that we're looking into is also something around like getting verifiable front ends on the market. Because over the last few years, that's been a lot of concern around like the centralization of front ends, right? And also there not being like really proper incentives around like front end development. For example, Uniswap made the case for having like a proprietary front end for which you can like add on fees to that. And I think Liquidity also has a front end where you can sort of deploy your own front ends and you get a share from the protocol and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like demand from projects for front ends which are actually decentralized, which other users can build, and yet they can build that in a verifiable and like secure manner. Where let's say as a user, you're sort of interacting with some random Uniswap front end that's being hosted by somebody else. You don't really know what the front end is doing, right? The front end could just straight up steal all your wallet and steal all your funds and do all of that. So there's a real demand for having a decentralized front end where you can sort of verify that the front end is actually doing what it's supposed to do, right? And like T's basically give you that sort of a guarantee.
So you're working on that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And if you consider like like technology is evolving, there's always new stuff coming up, and I imagine like if someone is coming again like trying to build on Web3 without the Web3 tooling, if they want to have like the latest, let's say, I imagine there's some kind of like delay here if they want to use your product as obvious.
Yeah, for sure.
How like do you try to anticipate what, like for example, by like looking at the marketing, what are the new things that people are working on, and anticipate what people might want to use it for? Or is this something you do?
Yeah, for sure. That's a bit of that for sure, where you kind of have to, I think it was Wayne Gracie or something, right? You basically skate to where the puck is. So you sort of have to predict where you think the market is going and what the developers would be wanting in a year. Let's say 6 months from now, because that's how long it's going to take you to like actually build a product and like polish it and put it out on the market, right?
Do developers tell you like what they want?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think the interesting bit is that in terms of tooling, we are still so far behind Web 2 that there's not really a lot of prediction that you need to do at this point, because Web 2 has sort of already laid down a path for you, and you can maybe get like 80-90% of the way just by following that path. We're still so far behind in Web 2 in terms of like tooling, right? So most of it is just looking at Web 2 and figuring out, hey, I'm able to do this just by running one command or like clicking a button. How do I make that happen over here, right? A lot of it comes from that, but yeah, some part is obviously about what the users actually want to do in Web 3.
Are these developers building like fully on chain, or is this type that comes to you like more trying to do just like maybe part of the, part of what they're building on chain and the rest off chain? What's
It is partly on chain and partly off chain. The way the way I like to like think of coprocessors is sort of like you must know rollups, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically rollups taken to that extreme where you just strip out the chain aspect of a rollup, right? So all you're left with is some computation that's happening on chain in a verifiable manner, right?
I see.
So it has its own trade-offs. The main one being that it doesn't really have state. So what that means is it can't really exist like independently. It sort of has to attach itself to like an L1 or an L2 or some blockchain in some form.
Yeah.
Right? The advantage of doing it this way is that, hey, you don't have a chain. That means you can kind of just go and attach to like every chain that's out there. Yeah.
Are they forced to use a specific chain when they come to you?
No, not really.
Okay.
That's the advantage of not having a chain. You basically get to develop something that's sort of like independent, and you can sort of make that attached to like every chain that's out there.
Do you have data of like what they're picking for the chains? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the most chosen?
The most chosen is currently Arbitrum because that's where our own contracts were previously deployed on. But a lot of demand is coming from like Polygon, especially because it's like quite cheap and there's like a quite big developer ecosystem over there, right? Some people building on like OP Stack and stuff as well. There's a lot of demand from like non-EVM chains as well. For example, Solana being the biggest one. But we aren't quite there yet to support Solana. But yeah, there's a lot of like demand over there as well.
That's interesting. Do you have a preference yourself?
Oh, well, it would probably be Arbitrum.
Okay.
Just because I think that's the first roll-up or like the first, I guess, scalable chain that we started using. I still remember it was, I think it was back when Optimism was still doing like the whitelisted signups. And Arbitrum was, I think, one of the only rollups that was actually out there without like a whitelisting. So you were just able to say one day, hey, here's Arbitrum, let me just go and deploy, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
For everyone watching, where can they find you? You can refer to this camera.
You can probably find me on Twitter. It's Roshan Rags. Or you can, the most easiest way to reach me is probably just through the Marlin project. I'm not that active on like social media or anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.